pick better moves if you have just started to play chess and to learn chess. There is a principle that we need to learn first, right? And that's the principle which is called the principle of activity. So I'm gonna show you this right away. So let's say right now that we have a board, right, which is empty. For an illustration of the principle of activity, let's say that we have these two knights, and let me just ask you, which of these two knights is better? Is it the knight on a1 or e5? You're naturally going to say the knight on e5, and that's gonna be if I replace it with bishops, with pawns, whatever. And why is this? You think this knight controls more squares. He controls 8 squares, basically almost an octopus. He controls 8 different squares, okay? And that is comparing this knight to this knight on a1, which is only going to control 2 squares. And so that's the simplest illustration of a principle which is called the principle of activity. And so what we want to do in the game of chess, okay, and that's whether we play against strong or weak opponents, what we want to do is we want to just take over as much squares as humanly possible, all right? And I'm going to show you this in 2 games, right, that I've played. And what I'm going to show you then also is how to think like this, okay, in everyday games, okay, that you're playing online, okay, or versus bots, how to use this principle, because this principle is going to help you to win versus a lot of chess beginners, okay? This video is made specifically for beginners. So let's begin very quickly. This is a game which is from the Sicilian, okay? This is me playing as white. Okay, and as you can see, black is a little bit better than me. And why is this? Black has this g7 bishop, right, which is extremely powerful on this diagonal. It controls a lot of squares. That is similar to the example that I've shown you previously. So he controls all of these squares. His knight is a little bit stronger than, let's say, my knight, but mostly it's because of this bishop compared to a knight that I have. So he has a material advantage because of the bishop for a knight, but also because this bishop is very, very strong. And so in here, what black is looking to do is he's looking to progress his pawns, okay, not right away, but he's looking to do this to open one of the files on my king's house, and basically from there to launch a very dangerous attack. And I'm looking to do the same. How do we know where we're supposed to attack? If you are taking a look, you're seeing that in here I have more pawns, right? Here there's the majority of pawns that I have, so I just want to attack at this area of the board. It's just going to be simpler for me to attack there than in, let's say, the queen side, right? But he wants to also attack here because 1, his pawns are more progressed, but 2, most of his pieces are also aiming at my enemy king, okay, in here on the queen side. So that's where both of us want to attack. So short story, I've made the move f4, okay, just genuinely trying to progress my pawns. b4, doing the same thing. Knight d5, okay, probably not the best move by me, but okay, this is not the end of the world. And now the move that quite caught me off guard. Rook to b8. And from here I want you to notice one thing. The rook on b8, alright, this one is already having some role in the attack against my own king, alright? It's been on a8, okay, supporting these 2 pawns. So what does this move do? It doesn't do all that much. I mean, yes, it supports the pawns in here, but probably a move like pawn to a5 will also do just the same. And so I was sitting here and I was thinking for a long time, alright, thinking, what does this move do? And I ended up with the conclusion that it doesn't do all that much. So I continued with my idea. So in here, what I was asking is, how can I get to my opponent's side of the board? Okay, so basically more closer to the king side using all of these pawns, right? And how can I start causing trouble in there? Alright, so thinking about this and just asking these 2 questions, what I've done is I've disqualified moves like moving the queen or the bishop or the rooks, right? Basically all of my pieces, because again, the goal here is to get to the opponent's side, but as fast as we can, okay? The pieces, they currently are not able to do this, right? Obviously, because these areas are protected by my opponent, okay? This piece cannot get in there like immediately, all right? And so the conclusion that I came up to was I need to do something with these pawns, all right? That's the way that I could get to my opponent's side of the board. The pieces currently cannot do it, only the pawns can, all right? And again, progressing as much as possible and taking as much available squares as I can along the way. So I've made the move because of this f5, right, that I was thinking was better. Okay, and all of this time, I'm using the idea that I just want to take over as much possible squares on my opponent's side of the board, alright? But also, not just to take as much squares as possible, but to also cause as much problems to my opponent as possible. So for example, after the move a5, my plan would be to progress with g5, okay? And I will probably open one of these pawns away. That's the idea that turns out I should have had in this game. So f5, knight e5, and g5, right? G5. If he takes here, obviously it's horrible for him, so he goes on with h5. His goal is not to let me open the king side for him. Normally, as should be expected, I do rook d to f1, supporting my huge pawn advancement on his king side. Rook to e8, which is fine. Alright, so in here I've actually made a mistake. Okay, I've made the move f6. And why is this a mistake? You think, okay, I'm gonna make problems for his bishop, cause it to be less active, basically inactive on h8. But the issue with this is that he can just take, okay? E takes on f6, g takes on f6, and the bishop goes out, and it's pretty safe. He's actually not in trouble anymore. And my attack is no longer existent, because how am I going to now open files against his king? I can't. So that's a mistake that I've actually made. I'm not that strong in attacking yet, but in here I actually see a huge relief. Okay, wait. But after the move f6, I actually had a huge relief. My opponent had made the move bishop to h8, but yeah, that's a big relief for me, because now this bishop is going to be way less active. Rook h to g1, and he does the move e6. And so, how do we get to a position like this, where we just slowly gain an advantage? So how do we gain an advantage in positions like this as beginners? What we are going to do is we're going to ask two questions. We ask, one, how do we control more squares at our opponent's side of the board? And it can be simple moves, even like f5, okay, where we are just controlling extra squares, for example, on e6, okay, in having contact with our opponent's king's pawns, alright? It can be something as simple as this, okay, and it can be something as simple as progressing, for example, a knight to d5. The knight on d5 is gonna have also an attack against these squares as well, okay? It can be simple things like this, but the key thing here is controlling squares, weak squares that are not protected by pawns at the opponent's side, right? That's the key here. And so once we learn, like, okay, do not lose material, right, and things like this due to tactics, okay, so once we learn like simple tactics and openings and things like this, the principle of activity can really come in handy, especially if we have just started to play against stronger players. This principle that I've done here actually was against a player who's way stronger than I am, and I've actually still stood, because after the move bishop to h8, I've made the move rook to h to g1, okay, which is not that much of a problem. But after e6, I've made a mistake. I'm just showing you how did I lose this, okay, probably so that you could learn this without the discard that I have. In here, the move that I've made is knight to e7, okay? And why is this a problem? I want you to take a moment and really look at this rook on e8. What does he do? At the moment, he does absolutely nothing. He literally just controls one extra square for black, and that's also on his side of the board. He made this move, which is the correct one. is to actually sacrifice and take this rook. Okay, so rook takes on e7, and after I take, let's say for a moment even the queen takes here, I've lost my attack, right? I cannot attack anymore, but he still has his own attack, and that's the problem that we have in here. I later on made other mistakes, but that is the major mistake that made me, well, lose this game, okay, especially because I've played against a stronger opponent than I am. But all the thing that I've done beforehand, all the way from pawn to let's see, pawn to f5, okay, all the way up to here and rook here, the thinking process that I had behind me was just how can I get to my opponent's side of the board, okay, and control more squares, okay. And so just wondering what move should I have done instead of knight to e7. Turns out that actually this knight have done its part. What I should do is I do knight to f4 and sacrifice this knight on h5. Alright, so let's say for a moment he does rook, just like a random move, rook to c8. The move that I should do is knight takes on h5, sacrificing this knight. It's a complete sacrifice. G takes h5, and not even take back this pawn, just go to g6, because now I've opened up the file against my enemy king. In here, material is has less relevance, and it's more about just genuinely attacking the enemy king. And so basically, using this principle of activity, it's not a guarantee that we'll win more games. So basically, using this principle of activity, it isn't a guarantee that we're now going to win all the games against other beginners, because we still need to learn the other topics like openings and tactics and so on. But it is certainly a weapon that we can now use against other players who are weaker than us, because they simply do not understand this idea of just controlling more squares and more in placing more pressure on the area of the enemy. And so how do we use this weapon? Okay, we're asking two main questions. It's a great example for this. I just ask, first of all, what is my less active piece and how can I get it to be more active? All right, that's the first question. And the second one is, how can I progress towards the territory of my opponent and cause as much problems for him in there? So before we wrap this video, and I'm gonna show you what you can do in order to apply this principle of activity more further, I want us to do a short exercise, okay, just applying this principle, okay, so that you could take a little bit more from this video. So in here right now, the position is considered equal, okay? It's out of an opening right now. These things do not really matter, but applying the principle of activity that we have gotten, all right? Applying this idea of taking more squares on the side of the opponent, all right, is the move c takes on d5 right now for black a good move. I would argue that this move c takes d5 is not a good move, all right, and that is for the reason that I'm gonna take here, okay. The queen is threat, so he cannot go here afterwards with the pawn, okay. He's gonna need to move first in order to make a threat, okay. The queen is gonna move, okay. Let's say she takes, all right, and then I'm gonna have a threat here to do the move rook to b6, all right, the 6th rank for my opponent, okay. So that's I would say not a good move. C takes d5, c takes d6, c takes d5, queen e6, and after, like, you move the queen or do whatever with her, I move my rook here, and now I have the 6th rank in my control, okay. So it's not a good move. Queen takes on d6 now, and rook to b6, again taking control over this 6th rank. It's clearly visible that this is good for white. So let's talk now about how you can implement this on the game IRL. What you can do is you can go to the normal platform where you're playing, right? Whether that's chess.com, Lichess, wherever, it doesn't matter. And to play a few games versus bots, asking 3 questions. So the first one is for checks, captures, and threats, just so that we'll be aware of regular tactics that may happen. And the second question after checks, captures, and threats is, what is my least active piece? And how can I get it to be the most active? How can I progress to my opponent's side of the board, rook to b6? And how can I cause trouble in there for my opponent, of course? So these are the three questions. Go now and try this against bots. All right. If you want, you can subscribe to this channel so that you could learn more. I'm sharing the knowledge that I learn about chess because I spend a lot of time actively learning chess. Right. And so I'll see you in the next video.